Now, it's generally expected that whenever an inventive new video game mechanic rears its head, that it's going to be imitated by all the competition until we're finally sick of it. Yet sometimes beloved mechanics end up going the way of the dodo long before we've had our fill, and can do so for a multitude of possible reasons. And that is unfortunately the case with these awesome mechanics, each of which added something seriously memorable to their respective games and, in extreme cases, even proved quite literally industry shaping for a while at least. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 popular video game mechanics the industry abandoned. Number 10. Destructible environments. Now, at the turn of the century, it truly seemed like destructible environments were going to be the next big thing in video games, with Red Faction's innovative geomod mechanic allowing players to obliterate large swathes of the environment all the way back in 2001. It appeared that the floodgates had been opened and environmental destruction would only become more complex and detailed in the years that followed. Yet aside from a few notable examples such as Battlefield Bad Company, destructible environments quickly disappeared from the AAA sphere entirely. And considering how popular open world games are these days, it's a damn shame that destruction tech has basically come and gone. It is also worth noting the technical side of the equation. For starters, allowing players to deform the environment in a granular way is extremely resource intensive, and in an era when modern games often struggle to hit a stable 60 frames per second as it is, the performance related risks, well, they speak for themselves. Furthermore, there's the general game design issue as well, that it's difficult to create an immersive world if the player is then given carte blanche to level it all to the ground. All the same, that this mechanic is largely absent from the modern AAA realm is a massive letdown given how much fun it's been in the past. Number 9. Integrated HUD'S. Now, Dead Space is a terrific game for many reasons, not least that it introduced an innovative immersive heads-up display which was integrated into the diegetic world of the survival horror game itself. Rather than crowd the screen with icons, life bars, and so on, the player's health and stasis meters were visible on the spine of protagonist Isaac Clarke's suit, while your ammo count is projected holographically just in front of your weapon. Furthermore, inventory screens and the map itself are also displayed within the game world as holographic projections. An intrusive HUD design can often severely cramp a player's immersion in an otherwise great game, and Dead Space is basically a note-perfect example of how to blend vital player information into the aesthetic in a way that feels totally organic. Even accepting that such HUD designs require some serious thought and creativity, it's surprising that almost 15 years after the game's release, integrated HUDs are still a serious rarity. Number 8. Split-screen multiplayer. Unless you're really young, you likely have fond memories of playing split-screen multiplayer games with friends on the regular, because once upon a time, split-screen was the only way to do multiplayer. Before online play existed, local split-screen was of course how pals would play together, but even as online multiplayer took off, most games still included a local equivalent. Yet in recent years, this has become increasingly rare, to the extent that even many major AAA games no longer ship with split-screen multiplayer at all, making it impossible to play couch co-op with friends or family. Now, this is clearly a byproduct of online multiplayer's popularity and how, if we're honest, couch co-op has steadily declined over the last decade plus, such that developers don't even consider it worth their time to implement into their games. Plus, from a technical perspective, it can cause a host of performance issues, what with the game effectively having to render the same environment 2, 3, or 4 times, and above all else, shifting the focus from local to online play heavily incentivizes every member of a friend group to buy their own copy of the game, rather than just crowd around a single TV with a single copy. And so, outside of the Nintendo Switch, which certainly prioritizes local multiplayer experiences, split-screen multiplayer is basically in its death throes, enough so that younger generations likely don't even lament its demise. And that's sad. Number 7. Sanity Meter. Now, Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem immortalized itself in the annals of gaming history by popularizing the Sanity Meter mechanic. That is, that the player must manage the protagonist's sanity throughout the story, and if they're spotted by enemies enough, they'll begin to suffer reality-warping hallucinations. These can range from the walls leaking blood to the protagonist suddenly dropping dead, or even pretending to reset the GameCube console. It was a brilliantly executed mechanic, enough so that Nintendo even patented the particulars of it way back in 2005. And while games like Amnesia: The Dark Descent have employed similar systems where players have to manage their character's sanity or risk losing grip on reality, it's been used surprisingly sparingly in the horror genre, despite the obvious potential for it to seriously mess with players' heads. Even if some developers have exercised caution due to Nintendo's patent, it expired back in November 2021, seemingly leaving the door wide open for any and everybody to now do with it as they wish. That so few developers have taken the minuscule risk risk of running afoul of Nintendo's lawyers over the last 2 decades, though, suggests that we're probably not getting a sudden influx of games with mind-bending sanity mechanics because, for some reason, the interest just isn't there. Number 6. Self-updating maps. Sticking with horror now, the genre deserves some major props for coming up with self-updating maps a whole quarter-century ago. Both the Resident Evil and Silent Hill franchises have featured in-game maps which were automatically updated with new information as you interact with doors or attempt to navigate your way through their game worlds. Resident Evil's maps are color-coded according to whether or not you visited rooms, while the original Silent Hill crossed off inaccessible routes as you explored the fog-blanketed town. Given how easily players can get confused and frustrated by the sheer number of rooms in a given area, having a map track everything that you've discovered is a god-tier quality-of-life feature that you don't need to keep a pen and paper nearby. And yet, a baffling lack of games have adopted a feature that, at least in theory, seems incredibly easy to implement and can save players some serious headaches. Number 5. Crash mode. Now, this is a highly specific example, albeit one that fans still fondly remember. Burnout 2 Point of Impact will forever go down in history as an all-timer of a racing game, and will do so for one reason, and that was that it blessed the world with Crash Mode. Now, Crash Mode was a minigame in which players crashed their car into traffic and then attempted to cause as much slow-motion vehicular damage as possible before landing, whilst controlling their car's path as it flew through the air. It was an instant hit with fans and quickly became a franchise staple, enough that EA even released a game centered purely around Crash Mode, imaginatively called Burnout Crash, in 2011. Yet Burnout Crash was the series' last entry to date, and while Crash Mode would slot quite perfectly into any number of current racing games, it still remains a firm relic of the past. Though some former Burnout devs did collaborate on 2017's Danger Zone, a low-budget attempt to make Crash Mode into its own game again, it largely fell upon deaf ears due to the lack of gameplay variety on offer. All the same though, a Crash Mode in Forza Horizon, The Crew, or Need for Speed? I mean, why the hell not? Number 4. Manual saving. While there's an undeniable convenience factor to auto-saving, which theoretically prevents you from losing progress in the event that you forgot to save or suffer a power outage, there's no beating the flexibility of a manual save. Being able to pause the game and save at any time was a common feature once upon a time, especially in PC games, allowing you to exit at a moment's notice without losing any progress and also promoting experimentation with risky gameplay via save scumming. Even accepting that it's not always possible to save at any point, the number of major AAA games which allow players to save whenever they want has dwindled massively in recent years. Now, the uptick in autosave functionality is certainly partly to blame, and also that so many modern games are developed first with consoles in mind, which with their more limited hard drive capacities can't necessarily support hundreds of manual saves for huge RPGs. All the same, options are certainly a nice thing, and while manual saves aren't really necessary for short linear indie games, for more wide open titles where freedom is encouraged, well, they should be an absolute must. As it stands though, bar some outliers, the industry as a whole is moving away from allowing players control over their actual game saves. Number 3. Speed limiters. Though many rather ignorantly dismissed the original Mafia game as a Grand Theft Auto 3 clone, it is a terrific open-world action game in its own right, with a number of merit-worthy original mechanics. Case in point, due to the game's more realistic gameplay, whereby players could find themselves on the wrong side of the law by running red light traffic, there was the option to toggle a speed limiter, effectively preventing you from exceeding the posted speed limit. Now, this was a great feature if you wanted to cruise around the game world and soak in the sights without having to think about how you were attracting the cops' attention. Though it reappeared in the second Mafia game, it was bizarrely absent from Mafia 3, where the police admittedly didn't seem to give much of a damn about the rules of the road anyway. Despite how simple and effective the speed limiter is as a mechanic, it's been largely ignored by the open world action game genre as a whole ever since Mafia 2 came out in 2010, which, to be honest, kinda sucks. Number 2. The Nemesis system. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor's standout feature was its much ballyhooed Nemesis system, a mechanic which tracks the player's interactions with Uruk enemies throughout the game. For instance, Uruks who survive an encounter with the player will return later in the game and remember their previous fight, possibly even sporting injuries from it, while those which kill the player will be promoted to captaincy. On the flip side, players could attempt to trigger infighting amongst the Uruk ranks in order to destabilize Sauron Sauron's army. It was a terrifically creative mechanic which merged gameplay with story and world building in a meaningful way, and yet has only been used in a substantial capacity in one other game, and that was 2017 sequel Shadow of War. Despite the mechanic's obvious potential across a bevy of game franchises and genres, developers have mostly steered clear of imitating it, likely due to Warner Brothers aggressively pursuing a patent for NEMESIS, which was finally granted in 2021. Outside of Assassin's Creed Odyssey's mercenary systems, which, if we're being generous, was a severely dumbed down facsimile of NEMESIS, it's nowhere to be seen. This proves all the more frustrating given that Warner Brothers hasn't bothered producing a Shadow of War follow-up or doing anything with the NEMESIS system since its release 6 years ago. And number 1, cheat codes. Cheat codes are such an ingrained element of classic gaming that you might not even think of them as mechanics, but the joy of finding cheats for your favourite game to enable God mode, infinite weapons, and considerably sillier options like GoldenEye's DK mode have largely gone up in smoke in modern gaming, and the primary reason for this? Achievements and DLC. For one, because cheats would largely eliminate the reward factor of achievements, one of the biggest drivers of player engagement these days, it's not in the interest of most developers to include them, and if they did, it certainly wouldn't be for free. After all, when DLC is a thing, why would you let players unlock secret characters or mode with a few button presses? Charge a few bucks for that instead, right? As such, modern games with honest-to-God cheat codes you don't have to reopen your wallet for, like Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, are serious outliers, and for generations of players who grew up with them readily available, it is a sad loss. And there we go, my friends, those were 10 popular video game mechanics the industry abandoned. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on the Future Game Show, where I do all of my gaming content going forward. That's FGS here over on YouTube. Or you can follow me personally over on Twitter, or I guess it's called bloody X now, at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Same for Threads, same for Instagram as well. Hope you're treating yourself well, my friend. Big love to you, and I hope to catch you around on the Future Game Show. Bye.